Hello, everyone. I want to talk about marketing research. It would be a short introduction, maybe some information you get in your study in the last trimesters, and I want to repeat them for our object of our class. That will be some kind of a test for the for using video lectures in our class, and that I combine with a short introduction to marketing research. I check the record stuff. Hey, everything works great. How do we research? We have a stepwise research approach, while marketing research and other research processes as well. We want to start with developing the research objectives and main questions of the research. What do we want to know from consumers, from other people which get in contact with our product and services, and so on. The second step can be a secondary data collection, so we can check which information are on the table at this time. We do some research of the theoretical background of our concepts, for example, psychological factors, and we create a research model and formulate some hypotheses. And the third step, we designing the primary research process, which means we choose the instrument, we create the instrument, we decide which research process are most suitable for our goal. We create a research strategy which includes the choice of the target group of our question or example or experiments, for example. The design means the same as the designing primary research. Design of research means the process, the instruments, and the concrete planning of the study. And the next step, we collect the data and do the statistical analysis. And these steps we want to do in this class also. We want to collect data on the two continents, and afterwards we want to do the statistical analysis. And in the last step, we want to write a report. In this case, we want to create a presentation and formulate the discussion and the conclusion. Discussion means no argumentation or something like that. Discussion in a research project means giving answers to the hypothesis which are formulating in step 2. In hypothesis are assumptions we wanna we are interested in, we formulate on the theoretical background. And in the last step, the discussion, we answer the question, are our assumptions correct or wrong? And also important is formulating conclusions from our research and the implications maybe for companies who are active in the field we did the research. And this is a stepwise research approach from why to now know and do. And in this class, we want to concentrate on the steps 3 to 5, designing a primary research process with an instrument based on a questionnaire, and the step, the data collection, and the written report. In this case, we want to create a presentation. And these are the main research steps of market research and some other research processes too. Now we come to the definition of consumer behavior. Maybe you know about this definition. I only want that you have this in mind for the next slide. Consumer behavior means the process and activities people engage in when searching for, selecting, purchasing, using, evaluating, and disposing of products and services. And which means the entire process from the first contact with our product and services uh, to the after buying processes. The marketer's success in influencing purchase behavior depends on how well they understand consumer behavior, and this is our main object in our class. They must know the specific needs consumers are trying to satisfy and how those needs translate into purchase criteria. Now we want to have a look at the consumer decision-making process. The decision-making process in a rational way is based on a problem recognition. Maybe I want to buy something, I have a special need. I think there a product which match my need, which solve my problem, and then I do the information research, for example, asking other people like colleagues and friends, or Google it, and then I have to evaluate the alternatives I found while my research process, and then I make a purchase decision, and then I make a post-purchase evaluation, which means am I satisfied or dissatisfied as a consumer. In the next slide, I want to give some additional information about these steps. In addition to the decision-making processes, which sounds very rational, we have a psychological process, which is also important as a decision-making process. We start with the motivation. The motivation is some kind of interest, some kind of curiousness or something like that. And then the consumer percept information about the product or the service, and then the consumer formulate an attitude, and then his or her integrate the information they get in the formation process and combine it with the attitudes he has made. And the learning process is parallel to the post-purchase evaluation, which means in the next purchase decision, remember on the experiences I made in the last purchase. In the next slide, I want to go deeper in this single steps. First, we want to get in touch with the consumer decision-making process in a rational way. The problem recognition means the consumer perceives a problem or need or want and becomes motivated to solve or satisfy it. In the information search process, the consumer look for information needed to make a decision, asking friends, Google it, go to a shop and get recommendations from the person in the shop or something like that. Then the consumer have some alternatives and have to evaluate the alternatives while considering other brands. Then it comes to the purchase decision, which means the actual purchase of the product or service. And in the post-purchase evaluation, the consumer compares level of performance with expectations and results, and consumer becomes satisfied or dissatisfied. Now we have a look at the relevant internal psychological processes I showed 2 slides before. The motivation are factors that compel a consumer to take a particular action. That could be a special need or something like that. The next step is a perception. This is a process by which consumers receive, select, organize, and interpret information to create a meaningful picture of the product or the service. Then the consumer formate an attitude. An attitude means an overall feeling toward or an elevation of an object. And then it comes to the integration of the information. That means the way product knowledge, meanings, and beliefs are combined to evaluate two or more alternatives. And the learning process means that individuals acquire the purchase and consumption and create some knowledge to future related behavior. Like this step, or no, all steps I think can be in a way we can remember it, we can talk about it, we realize that these steps are we go through one step after another, and the process can also be deep in our mind, and so we are not aware uh, these single steps. And for example, if you want to buy a car, maybe you have a decision-making process who takes a long time, and so you are aware of the process of perception, of research, and something like that. And another example, we want to buy some chocolate, and there's, I think, a short process, a short decision-making, a short decision process, and so you are not aware of all these single steps of decision-making process. Talking about perception, marketers want to know how consumers sense external information. For example, commercial. What about sensation of colors and special texts or celebrities in commercial or something like that? We are interested how they select and use sources of information, in which case, for example, you use the internet, in which cases you ask friends, and so on. And we are also interested in how information is interpreted and giving meaning. We know already that every single person interprets the information in a different way. Maybe we have some groups of consumers, some target groups, and so we can assume that we can make the assumption that all participants of this target group interpret the information the same way, but we cannot be sure of this. The perception process is included the steps receiving the information, selecting the information, organize the information, interpret the information, and I said before, they're not we are not aware of all these single steps. Only in some special decision-making processes, like buying a very extensive product or services. Selective perception means that we have a selective exposure of products and services and a selective attention. Some people say, oh, I didn't see it. There's no commercial about this. Anyone else? Oh, I'm very interested in it. That means a selective attention. We are not. It is not possible to engage the attention of all different consumers. Only will reach special target groups. And the selective comprehension, selective retention means that there are selective perception aspects in the other part of the perception processes. Individual consumers have different evaluative criteria, and they are a mix of objective and subjective attributes. I want to explain the example on a brand evaluation. There are some objective attributes like the price of a product, the features of a product, the warranty, and the service. And there are also some subjective attributes like image of the brand, the style, the performance I expect on this product or this special product. And the marketer's evaluative view should be combined with the consumer's evaluative view. And here we see on here a man which should be a symbol of the marketer, and the marketer or the creator of a product sees the product as a bundle of attributes of characteristic, and the consumer has a different evaluative view. They see the product in total with a lot of links to the individual situation and other aspects. I want to explain it in the next 2 slides. The marketer or the engineer will ask himself about the power, or is attraction okay, is it too pricey? But that are not the questions consumer may have. And so we come on the same product to the consumer's evaluative view. Here you see a member of the target group of the product, and the consumer see the product as a set of outcomes for the consumer himself. The first view is the functional view. Will it pull the trailer at the store? How close can I get to shops? How does it cut tall, thick grass, and so on? And we have a psychological part of the evaluative view, which includes questions like, will I have more time for golf when I buy this product? Will it still be fun later this summer? Will the neighbors be impressed with my lawn after I use this product for a while? It will be interesting for this consumer. And if you compare to the marketer's evaluative view, the engineer hasn't got these ideas. Show it to you, the difference between the marketer's evaluative view and the consumer's evaluative view. Relevant for buying a product is naturally the consumer's evaluative view, and so it's very important for us to get in touch with this evaluative view with our research instruments. What do we research? What can we research? We can get information about the consumer motivation. We can get information about the personality of the consumer, the personal characteristics, and the image. We can get information about the consumer perception of commercials or other marketing instruments. We can evaluate the consumer learning process. We can get information about attitude formation and changing attitude. More important for the marketer's point of view is the changing of an attitude, behavior. No, there's a strong link between attitudes and behavior. We have a positive attitude, for example, on a product. The probability I want to buy this product and buy this product are very high. Higher in the other case, if I have a negative image of the brand, my attitude on this brand are full of negative associations, the probability that I buy the product will be very low. We can get information about the communication instruments we use. We can get information of the decision-making process in the brain of the consumer. Maybe it's a little bit difficult, but we can get some information about it. We can get information about the socio-demographic aspects, about the economic situation of the consumer, about the cultural background, the psychological factors influencing consumer behavior. They're important as well. And we can evaluate whether our segmentation of the population of consumers are correct or suitable to our product or service. And the picture shows in the red boxes the influence of different aspects on the behavior of the consumer and the other way around. And so we have perception and sensation as huge influence of the cognition, of the affect, the beliefs, the individual beliefs of consumers, and the social and other influences, which means influences which come from the media or influences from other person. From other person like friends and colleagues. Oh, excuse me, I have to make that. And we see in the picture also the role of market research. Market research get information from the consumer, and from the conclusions on your market research project, you can formulate a strategy for the company. This is the idea. On the orange boxes, in the orange boxes, you see behavior aspects of the consumer. For example, the searching process, the choices, the evaluating the alternatives, choose preferences, and do some communication about the product or service. Changing attitudes, as I stated before, is a very important thing for us, and these very simple process of changing attitudes, which start with changing beliefs about an important attribute of the product, and then we change the perception of the value of an attribute. We want to make this attribute more valuable in point of view of the consumers, and we add a new attribute to the attitude formation mix of our product, and then there'll be a chance changing the perceptions or beliefs about a competing brand. This is a very simple model of changing attitudes, and the psychological research. We have some other models. Maybe in the next weeks I want to show you other models. Let's have a view into the purchase decision and evaluation processes. We talked about a few slides before. We have the stage of pre-evaluation, then the integration processes, which means integrate the different information I get about the product. Maybe I use for the evaluation process heuristics. Heuristics are decision rules we use automatically. There's no decision rule I be aware of. I can talk about it. I can't verbalize it. Heuristics are very short, very fast decision-making processes, which do our brain automatically, and so we have no influence on it. And this is very important for short decision-making processes, like buying, bar of chocolate, for example. And heuristics are connected to the referral decision rules. The decision stage includes the purchase intention and the aspect of brand loyalty, which means we can predict behavior of consumer in the future. And the post-evaluation process, the consumer decides between a satisfaction and dissatisfaction, and we have to avoid cognitive dissonance. Cognitive dissonance is the lack between behavior and attitude, and in the post-evaluation process, that means I bought a product, and at home I think, oh no, why I did that, it's terrible, I don't use it, and something like that. This is the process of cognitive dissonance. There's a gap between my behavior, I bought the product, and my attitude, oh no, I don't like it anymore. And we have, on a marketer's point of view, we have to reduce the cognitive dissonance, and because of this, you get sometimes information in the package like this: oh, congratulations, you bought this product. These information are formulated for the goal of reducing the cognitive dissonance. So my attitude should be, oh, it's great having this product, and so the probability that I develop cognitive dissonance is lower. The idea of cognitive dissonance, there's in the consumer decision-making process, it's located at the post-evaluation process. We talked about the internal influences on consumer behavior, and now we want to have a short look on external influences on consumer behavior, like culture, subculture, and social class. Maybe the single aspect like culture, subculture, and social class are not very sharp in their definition in the marketer's point of view, but it's very easy. Even it's relevant for our context, for a product, for research, and then we create a definition with sharp pointers between the different aspects, or it's not so relevant for us, and so it's not important to get in touch with it. Maybe in our class, where we want to collect the data into continent, the culture and subculture aspect may be interesting, but it's your choice to take focus on it. An external influence also is a reference group, which means some kind of peer group, colleagues, friends, some people the consumer is compare himself. For example, if you buy a new car, maybe your reference group are the neighbors, which are all car owners too. And the situational determinant, going to my example of buying a bar of chocolate, maybe the situational determinants are much more important than the culture and subculture, because I'm very hungry at the moment and I want to eat a bar of chocolate. And so the culture and subculture are not so important for this decision-making process. And so the influence of these external, the impact of the external influences you see on this slide are very different from decision-making process to decision-making process. It depends on the product and the service. We want to talk about some marketing instruments applied in consumer research, the observation, the focus group, in-depth interviews, content analysis, survey, and experiment. And in our class, we want to conduct surveys, maybe experiment. I'm not quite sure at the moment, but we are not. The instrument, in-depth interviews, and content analysis are not so relevant for us, and so I will skip it in this presentation. We start with the observation. Observation research or field research is a type of correlational, for example, non-experimental research, in which a researcher observes ongoing behavior. There's no manipulation by the researcher in the situation. Maybe creating the setting depends on the manipulation factor by the researcher, but naturally and usually it's a field research, and so you don't manipulate. The naturalistic or non-participant observation has no intervention by a researcher. They do only the observation. It is simply studying behavior that occur naturally in natural context. Natural contexts means that is unlike the artificial environment of controlled laboratory setting. Natural contexts are not refers to woods and trees or something like that. Natural context means the consumer in the way he acts normally, and that could be in a consumer context, a shop, for example. Importantly, naturalistic observation, there's no attempt to manipulate variables. It permits measuring what behavior is really like. And to explain observations, I ask you to watch, I think, 5 minutes video on YouTube, where you can see some examples on observations. You can watch this video right now and stop this video lecture, or you can watch it afterwards. We now want to come to the focus group. I talked only a few minutes about observation because I think we don't want to realize or conduct observation while this class. The focus group is a discussion-based interview that produces verbal data generated via group interaction. Focus groups aim to build conversation among participants rather than conversation between the interviewer, focus group facilitator, and individual participants, which would be akin to doing a round-robin exercise. Most important is the interaction element between the participants, and that is the main task on focus group facilitators to make the participants in doing interaction with each others. For focus group, I recommend you two videos which are published on YouTube. I think you can go with this a deep view on focus groups. Focus groups have a lot of limitations. Focus groups cannot give us a good idea of what proportion of the population is likely to buy the product. And for this goal, we need larger target groups than 5 to 7 persons sitting in the focus group. And focus groups can also give us information about the price consumers are willing to pay. I think for this for this goal you have to make an experiment or do a questionnaire. The groups are inherently social. That means that consumers will often say things that they may make them look good. For example, they watch public television rather than soap operas or cook fresh meals for their families daily, even if that is not true. Consumers may be reluctant to speak about embarrassing issues, for example, weight control or birth control in front of other people, and so you have this aspect in mind while creating focus groups. The next instrument I want to talk about is the experiment. And to explaining the experiment, I want to talk about a very important experiment, the Asian disease problem, created by Kahneman and Tversky. Kahneman and Tversky are very famous business psychologists who get the Nobel Prize for their research in decision-making processes, and so they are very interesting for us. Maybe you heard about the Asian disease problem in your study, so you can skip the next 3 slides. But in other cases, please get now in contact with the Asian disease problem. I think it's very interesting. Okay, imagine their experiment with 2 groups of students. The first group gets problem number 1, and there will be no surprise that student group number 2 get problem number 2. And there are only small differences in the 2 problems. And all students get the same task. They have to make a decision after reading the problem. Okay, problem number 1. Imagine that the US is preparing for the outbreak of an unusual Asian disease, which is expected to kill 600 people. 2 alternative programs to combat the disease have been proposed. Assume that the exact scientific estimates of the consequence of the programs are as follows. The students have to decide between program A and program B. If program A is adopted, 200 people will be saved. If program B is adopted, there's a 1/3 probability that 600 people will be saved and a 2/3 probability that no people will be saved. Which of the two programs would you favor? That was a task for group number 1. And now for the task for group number 2. Problem 2. The text at the beginning is the same. Imagine that the US and so on till the words of the programs are as follows. That's exactly the same which we read in problem number 1. But the answer and options are different. If program A is adopted, 400 people will die. If program B is adopted, there's a 1/3 probability that nobody will die and a 2/3 probability that 600 people will die. Which of the two programs would you favor? So have a look into the two programs. If program A is adopted, 400 people will die. And now we switch to problem number 1. Here it says if program A is adopted, 200 people will be saved. 200 people will be saved versus 400 people will die. At the end, it means the same. You have 600 people in the population. 200 people will be saved. That means 400 people will die. And in problem number 2, it says 400 people will die. It means at the end the same. And program B is formulated in the same way with a 1/3 probability and the two situations, or the two answering options differs in the meaning, in the using the words dying or safe. Okay, now look at the results. These are the results of the so-called framing effect. In case the option was positively phrased, which means 200 people will be saved, more people choose the secure answering option, which means A, than in the other group. And in case the negatively phrased problem, 400 people will die, a lot of people will take the risky answer option. And so you see difference. It's the same setting, the same situation. Kahneman and Tversky differ only the word of the two answer options. That means the agent disease problem, and the result is, the conclusion is, the way a problem is represented or framed can have a large effect on whether it will be solved. And when the question was framed negatively, people were more likely to choose the riskier alternative. This effect is called framing effect. Framing effect means the modification of the context and or the description of a problem affects the decision. Alternative descriptions of the same problem can namely suggest different impressions and therefore make different thoughts more accessible than others. As it affects the subjective interpretation of the problem, it could have some repercussions on the perception of outcomes and contingencies which are associated with the different decision options. In this way, the same individuals can make different choices in similar problems just because of their respective frame. That was a very famous experiment, Asian disease problem. And to go on a higher level talking about experiments, we see now a figure with the steps of an experiment. First of all, we want to state the problem, like at the research one we saw a few slides before, which means survey literature, survey theories, or something like that. Then we formulate hypothesis, which means we make assumption of the results of the experiment. And then we have to define variables. We have to differ between independent and dependent and other variables in our experimental setting. To explain in a short way, the independent variables are these variables we want to manipulate, and the dependent the dependent variable we want to measure. The design experimental procedure includes the measurement, the subject, the manipulation with 2 groups, 3 groups, in which part of the experiment are the manipulation set or something like that. Which include the experimental procedure includes also the experimental design. I talked a few slides before, and the experimental procedure, which means the instructions, the instrument, the apparatus maybe you want to use, and maybe not maybe, the questionnaire is a special kind of experiment, sometimes without a manipulation. And after designing the experimental procedure, you conduct the experiment, you analyze the results, which means doing the statistical analysis, and then you have to write up a report or creating a presentation or something like that. Experiments means you have you test hypothesis by comparing the behavior of 2 or more groups of participants under very controlled conditions, which means they're doing all the same, but not in the manipulated aspect. The groups are treated as similarly as possible, except for the critical variable, the independent variable, that the researchers is interested in. The researcher intentionally manipulates or overrides the independent variable to study its impact on behavior. For example, test 2 different commercials or something like that, and while measuring this impact, everything else should be constant. And the groups, experimental groups, mean the participants exposed to the independent variable that the researcher is really interested in, and we have 1, 2, 3 and so on experimental groups, and sometimes you have a control group, and in this group the participants not be exposed to the independent variable of interest, but rather to some substitute control condition. Sometimes you have a control group and sometimes you have not. Here are some aspects to formulate the research problem. The first step is specify the research objectives. That would be interesting, I think, in 2 weeks for you. Step 2, the environment of context or context of the problem. Step 3 is the nature of the problem. Step 4 is alternative courses of action. And step 5 is the consequences of alternative courses of action. And the step 6 is degrees of uncertainty. And with this aspect, you can formulate the research problem, but it's a very theoretical point of view on the research problem. We can with a little bit shorter and more practical in a more practical way than these 6 steps, but I want to show it the steps from the literature. Okay, we have some basic research issues we should have in mind. The first one is ask the right question. This is a sense of project design at the heart of proper planning. The research planner must remember that every project is unique and as such must be tailored to the user's needs. The second basic issue is ask the right people. Sample design should be such that only those people who are of interest to the research users are contacted, and such that those who are contacted are reasonably representative to the group of interest. That is very important for our small study we want to conduct in a few weeks. The third step is ask questions the right way. It is not enough to be able to ask the right question, they must be asked in the right way. This is the essence of questionnaire design we want to talk about in the next week. The researcher can use all the aids available from the new technologies, but if the wording of the question is not clear to the respondents, the results will be useless. One basic that is overlooked all too often is pre-testing the questionnaire. This is crucial for ensuring that responses are the ones that are needed to address the problem. Fourth, obtain answers to questions. The process of data collection is central to all marketing research. Techniques used should be selected for how each bears of non-response and response alike. Fifth, relate answers to the needs of the research user or client. Data seldom speak for themselves. Proper data analysis is needed if a study is to have any value to the user. Here there is a risk of letting advanced techniques become the master of the researcher rather than the opposite. Common sense is a valuable tool for the researcher when considering alternative analysis approaches for any project. 6. Communicate effectively and in a way that the client understands. Many good projects are ruined in this stage. The information that is reported to the user should be in a form that is understandable for the user, so that he or she can tell that it is relevant to the issues at hand. How to choose a primary research method. You don't want to do this in practical because I choose the primary research method for you, but I think it's important to know something about the process. Very important questions are: can the respondent answer accurately what someone consciously believes may differ from deeper opinions? Beliefs about hypothetical products may not be well developed. We want to go further, go deeper in this aspect while talking about questionnaires. If you say yes at this point, you choose an exploratory or precision research. Exploratory means you have an not so precise idea about the object of the study, and so you do individual interviews to get an overview on the field, or you do focus groups. If you have a precise idea about the research, survey is the appropriate instrument. And then ask the question, does the question involve opinions or behavior? And so in case of opinions, you have to ask for the accurately answer of the respondents. If you want to get information about the behavior, you should ask yourself whether the relevant behavior be observed in the consumer's natural environment. If you say yes, it's possible, then you can use, for example, scanner data for questions like what brands are chosen, what is the impact of single advertising, information about previous purchases, and some demographic information. And if these information are not enough for your research objective, you should do an observation. Maybe you get information like this: how long does the shipper spend? What does he or she look at? Is anyone else involved in the decision-making process in the shop, or something like that? If the behavior is not cannot be observed in the customer's natural environment, maybe you should choose the instrument experiment. They can measure the impact of product design, or the quality of advertising message, or maybe you can use a physiological measurement also, for example, for special reactions, for measuring the intention or the arousal. Okay, what does that help for you? There's an overview of the criteria, which brings you to a precise design for your research study. In this class, we want to concentrate ourselves on surveys because I think it's an easy way to start market research. The next topic should be questionnaire design, but this is coming soon. Questionnaire design is a large topic for our class, and so I will present you this in another way, I think in next week or in 2 weeks. Thanks for coming by in a virtual way.